All right. Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Healing Brothers podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. How you doing today, Sam?
Man, hot, stressed, bothered, ornery. It's like, I can see, but why does this man even talk to people? He's always ornery, he's always bothered. It's like, what is up with him?
Mhm.
But that's me, you know, legendary,
Legendary. Legendary.
legendary. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of folks using that title these days.
Hey, man, I'm just saying, not a lot of people have made an impact on the community the same way that you have, especially when we talk about trauma. And trauma hasn't been something that it currently is a term that many people understand and know. But when I met you, nobody was really talking about trauma. I mean, there are a few people around, but you were the person locally here in the Twin Cities that talked about it. Then we learned about Joy DeGrew and some other folks. But when it came to understanding what Black folks are going through, really what everybody's going through, trauma wasn't the connection point for people, right? It was just, well, that's how Black folks are. And um, we just deal with a lot of pain, and we're resilient. It was a lot of the same stuff that we kind of hear now, but trauma wasn't really thrown into the mix until relatively recently. I would say probably in the last 4 or 5 years is when trauma really started to come out as one of the issues that Black people are having.
Yeah, and in my honorary self, I would question uh even, is it more there's still a struggle when we're a little bit more comfortable using the word trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right, in our community, because there was a time we wasn't even comfortable doing that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're much more comfortable using the term trauma. Um, I still think we are struggling to fully connect it to what's going on in our community, and connected to how it relates to what we call culture. I think that
Mm-hmm.
those two are a major struggle. At least when I talk to folks, they'll talk about trauma in the Black community. Then you when you ask the question, well, tell me what you're talking about, and they're kind of in some cases all over the place. Now, granted, there are folks, and luckily we've been able to connect with folks around the country who've been continuously, we're into talking about this, in the different pockets around, right? Who really, they're not household names,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, some of our guests we've had on recently. One of the young men was talking about the fact that you don't have a whole lot of folks connect, you know, connecting with the podcast and that kind of stuff is interesting to him, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and because of um, the honest observation that I think we need to take around the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that has set the work that you do apart is the conference in itself. And the conference it's in its 13th year. We're talking about the annual community empowerment through Black Men Healing Conference. So we have the 13th annual version of this conference. Last week when we did the podcast, we talked about some of the history of the podcast, how it got started, some people's responses to the actual conference. But I wanted to go a little deeper today and discuss it a little bit further. How did the first one get started? How did you maintain over these last 13 years, having the adjustment through the COVID-19 last year and switching things up? Like there's a lot of history here, and there's a lot more to do, and a lot more to go with this conference. So wanted to show the video, and then on the other side of the video, we'll get into some of the background of the conference.
Pain is the gift nobody wants. We got to deal with the pain because the pain has been dealing with us. That these conditions shape the way in which we see our world, and as a result, cannot see beyond the ways in which we need to transform our schools, our community-based organizations, to create opportunities to saturate a community with healing opportunities.
About relationships, and we moved away from that.
That's going to work at McDonald's for the rest of their life, you're going to teach them that way.
History. So, folks, we are discussing the 13th annual Community Healing Through Black Men Healing Conference. Community empowerment. I don't know. I keep getting that wrong. Community empowerment through Black Men Healing Conference. What do you guys say about that, Sam?
Well, you know, in the video, and unfortunately didn't get the whole video in, but maybe we'll do that later. But the person who was talking about the statement, we need to deal with the trauma or the trauma is going to deal with us, that's one of the co-creators of the conference, right? James Muhammad. And what happened in terms of how this really started was over an argument me and him was having. You know, Brother James is Muslim, was an active member in the Black Muslim community. Actually, had a high level of leadership here in Minnesota under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and so he had his view about what was going on in terms of mainstream community and that kind of thing. And then later on, you know, kind of some people say mellowed out. I just think he just got more clear, made it more clear about how he wanted to live his life and how it fitted in his life. And we met up at an organization here in Minnesota. We had not connected, you know, from the first time I met him, where we really didn't kind of agree. And we were really talking about issues around Black manhood. And we noticed that you had a group of people who would just talk about how the responsibility of Black men, right? You know, they got to be more responsible. And then you had the other side, which you know, yeah, we need to be responsible, but we cannot, you know, let white folks off the hook or let the system off the hook, and we got to deal with this system. And I leaned more to, you know, but we also have this responsibility of holding each other accountable. So it ended up into, I wouldn't call it an argument, but if you was listening to it, it was an argument, right? It was a very loud debate. Let's put it that way, you know. And we were in the office together. I think we were in his office, and we worked together in a primarily white organization, which is usual here in Minnesota. And the staff was outside of the room scared to knock on the door because they was already scared of me and him anyway because we was the two main black men working for the organization. And all of a sudden we both got quiet, which scared them even more because they thought one of us killed the other one or something like that. It's like when you put a rat and a cat in a garbage can, they'll fight to the death, and what we realized, we were both right. You can't let the system off the hook, but at the same time, we also have to look at accountability within the community. And what we came to is looking at accountability within the community through the lens of trauma, right? And concluded that, and we wrote the article, and probably would be a good idea on my part to really send out, re-up that and send it out, but it really hasn't changed. And in the article we wrote, it really talked about when we talk about the ills in the Black community, the first thing that come up is the disparities and what's going, how racist the system is and all these other pieces. And if you're not talking about it, the last thing, if nothing else, you end up talking about what Black men weren't doing. Black men weren't taking care of their kids, Black men this, Black men that. But nobody was talking about the trauma of those Black men. And nobody was talking about the effects that trauma can have on people's decision making, right? And how that could be affected in some way. And that was a very we realized that was a very important piece to take in consideration at the same time and try to figure out how that was. And we knew about Dr. Joy DeGrew's work and tried, and did make some efforts to contact her at the time. And we did have a chance to talk to her a couple of times when she was here in Minnesota. And so we knew that her work was paramount in starting this conversation, right? Because that's what she was looking at, is the effects of this trauma, especially trauma of African Americans with the legacy of slavery in their background, and what kind of effects it could have, both positively and negatively, because when we usually talk within our community, we find, and I understand why we find it important to do this in terms of want to really have a positive view, because we're always so often seen in a negative light. The positive view around resiliency, and a positive view about family and community, in spite of the negative views that was being portrayed by media. And that's what started the conference. And so we just took a chance because nobody was doing that. I had a little money set aside, and we made a budget according to the little money I set aside. We also wanted to do it inside the community as well. So we went to one of the community institutions that had had space, and made a deal with them. We used Black vendors for the food, brought them in and start putting stuff together. And we had the audacity to charge $35 for the conference. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh,
$35.
$35 for a full day conference, right?
Wow.
And you thought the world had ended. I mean, I was getting so much pushback, or we were getting so much pushback from the community. Why are you charging for such a important idea? And it's like, why not?
Mhm.
You know, if we got to do something different, right?
Right.
If we
Right.
believe in this ideal, um, we need to invest in it. You know, we invest in everybody else's ideals, right?
Right.
At a higher level. And so if you can't afford $35, don't come. So you know how that ended up looking. Oh, there you go with that Sam. That Sam, he just don't care what he says to folks. But I meant that, right?
Mhm.
Because they come out, well, why don't you get some grant money and that kind of stuff? But I didn't want anybody outside of our community dictating to us what we could say, because at that time the only money that was being given out was for mentorship programs,
Right.
um, reentry, around prison, and
Mhm.
and and why kids were failing in school, right?
Mhm.
And we in the with the title of the conference being what it was, community empowerment through Black men healing, which was a contradiction anyway to some people. How do you
Mm.
going to empower a community through Black men healing, right? And
Right.
then
Right.
Black men and healing didn't go together at all at that time, right?
Mm.
And ironically, there's still a certain amount of uh, angst and confusion around the
Yeah.
title. And I
Mhm.
remember, I think 3 years in, we even had a discussion about changing the title,
Mhm.
and it's like, we ain't changing the title, you
Yeah.
know, because the title, even to this day, is scary for folks for some
Yeah.
reason,
Mhm.
you know. But we did it. I mean, we put it together. I think 35 people registered. That's how many people we had registered the day before the conference, and we were planning for maybe 80, hopefully getting
Mhm.
80. That was our budget, and we ended up with 135,
Wow.
135, and 10 white individuals at that 135. Because we give Black men healing, white folks are
Scary.
scared to death to show up.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting how we are supposed to be okay being in spaces where we're like one or two of us, but
Mhm.
they're so scared to be in spaces with a bunch of Black folks,
Mhm.
right? I mean, terrified. You could even though they stuck it out, you could see it in some of them's eyes. Sitting, they
Mhm.
almost all sat in the same row, and that kind of thing. Um, And the other piece was, out of that 135 folks, a lot of those Black folks didn't know each other, and they all
Mm.
worked in the same field.
Yeah. And still common till to this day.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now they probably heard of different folks, but they took a chance, came into the inner city, and we did the whole conference was built around the question: if we focused on addressing Black male trauma, would the community improve? We had a panel on education, a panel on religion, a panel on relationships. We had a panel on fatherhood, and then we had an overall panel from each of those categories on how do we go forward, right?
Mhm.
And that's probably one of the few conferences we were able to get majority of it filmed. I mean, I think one of these days we probably need to um, take those clips, put them together into a I don't know if you want to call it a documentary or what you might want to call it, but I have went back into it, and that's like that piece that started us off about the if we don't deal with trauma, it will deal with us, came from that original
Mhm.
conference.
Mhm.
And there's some good pieces in there that we really do need to look back on to see if we have lost our way along the way, right? And because we call this a conference and people have their vision of conferences,
Right.
that's probably one of those other things that's been a little difficult. Because our conference is really about real information. Our conference is about information that people might not think about in their jobs, think
Right.
about when they're dealing with our community, because I'm a firm believer that sometime people, if you want people to change, they need to know what they don't know,
Right.
or at least be creative enough to develop a different way of looking at the same problem, right? And so that's still a little difficult, I think. But so as you earlier mentioned, this is our 13th year. There's been a lot of lessons learned. Um, some of them have been disappointing. Um, 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 but in the most part, it's even though at times when you're going through it, trying to put it together, it doesn't seem like it's worth it. But every time we're done with it, we realize it was.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear just that point of history, because I feel like there's still that angst around the conference today. Like the title, I think that still bothers people. I've had white people ask me, can I come because I'm white before? Like it's a conference for everybody who's trying to solve this problem. I've also had conversations with folks who know that I'm involved with it about the community coming to the conference, and they'll say things like, "Well, how do we get community there?" Or they can't afford the fee, I always say, "Well, there could be sponsorships. Like, have you talked to any organizations? Have you communicated with us to see if we can figure out a way to get folks in?"
Right.
I feel like there's so many excuses that come with this being a conference, and yeah, it is. The conference isn't, another thing that I think is unique is it has a lot of professional people who attend it, but it's really not aimed at professionals. It's truly aimed at the community. And I think one thing that you do strategically is finding people, local people and national folks, who can speak to multiple different audiences. It's not just for probation officers and social workers and educators. It's for anybody who shows up who's trying to solve this problem. And that's something I think gets lost for a lot of people. And I think the pricing thing's funny because $35 to come to a conference is extremely cheap. What we're charging now is still extremely
Yeah,
cheap.
extremely
It's way
cheap.
undervalued.
Right.
Like way
Right.
undervalued.
Right.
Um,
Because I think,
yeah.
I think we charged 150 or 125 when we were live, and we're charging
Yep.
like $100 now. And what's
Right.
amazing to me, I've seen online conferences charge
Mm-hmm.
from $400 to $900,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And people pay it.
Yep.
And I've attended some of them conferences, and all they are information dumps,
Mm-hmm.
if that.
Yeah.
you know, folks with a lot of degrees and whatever, some of the most boringest
Mm-hmm.
conversations I ever seen in my life, right? But you can say you were there, right?
Right.
And you collect your CEUs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, that's one of those things when you get those pushbacks when you see, I think one of the things we've done, because I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew, it needed to be done. And there's lessons to be learned inside of lessons, right? Like one of the lessons was the reason I charged $35. I could have probably did it for free. I probably could have, somehow. Even though I didn't have I didn't have no sponsors, but I wasn't going to do it for free. That was my money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think as a community, we got to get out of this whole thing about things done in our community should be free, right?
Yeah.
And because you got people outside our community think we should do stuff for them for free.
Exactly.
Right. And you see that when, people call me, and not as many, because the word is out not to call me. Right. We'll call and I say, what's your budget? Well, we can give
Yeah.
you $100 stipend or whatever. And I'm thinking, you're an organization that got a budget bigger than that. And I bet you ain't telling no folks who don't look like me, you only got $100.
Right. Or county. They got a
Right.
budget.
Yeah, right. And then on top of that, at least be nice about it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I do things for free, but I get to choose when I want to do things for free,
Right.
or do it for little or nothing for a stipend. Right. Don't get mad at me when I say no to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I've had folks talk about, well, I thought you would do it for your community. I already do stuff for my community. What are you talking about?
Man,
I already do stuff for my community. I do stuff for my community the way I need to do stuff for my community. And we're part of the problem with that, right? Because we have been so eager to say yes to stuff just to be in front of just to be part of or get your name on stuff. Man, please. So the $35 was the show. If as a community we want things different, we got to be willing to invest in the difference.
Right.
And you cannot go to what you think is the perpetrator, get the perpetrator's money, and think the perpetrator is not going to ask for something back.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How you going? And why is it in our community it can't be investment money? A lot of times it's got to be nonprofit and grant money.
Mm-hmm.
They'll talk a good game, and lately, with the pandemic and stuff, well, we're going to invest more in the community. Well, the thing is how are you investing in the community? Right now, there's a lot of money flowing in the community, right? I was asked to do something for a community organization, not in a different part of Minnesota. The young lady, contacted me. She tracked me down. She tracked me down through LinkedIn and gave messages, and she tracked me down through the conference website, and because my email has changed, and there's been a problem with it because it was hacked earlier, so it's been a little bit more difficult getting a hold of me, and so I call her, and I made the mistake, when I do it every now and then, instead of asking what their budget was, she asked me how much it was, and I gave her a number, and she said, well, Mr. Simmons, we've gotten all this money from the government. I can actually pay you more than that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thanked her for at least saying that, because not everybody will say that. They'll just go and run with it, right? But she said that, we came at a different number, which, I was comfortable with. I was comfortable with the original number. But the problem I have is because I've been so diminished by negotiating, or maybe not even negotiating well, with mainstream organizations, I undervalue myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is another part of a trauma thing. So there's been lessons I had to learn, but that $35 was one to prove that we are willing to invest in ourselves. We proved that we was willing to invest in ourselves. Another piece of that is that we need to have other voices involved. There was a complaint that we didn't have. We did not invite any of the so-called community leaders, right? They were invited.
They didn't come.
But they didn't come.
And
they were
it
invited.
Still happens. After 13 years, it still happens.
I mean, members of major organizations and their clients will come. I've had, or their staff, I've had some of them staff say, oh, I done told them I'm going, if I got to pay it or not, pay for it myself, right? That's their staff, right? And, and the big piece is those community leaders need to be called directly and asked.
Yeah.
So, we were able to get a state representative to come, but, the thing is he responded to my emails. We talked about it, but I have a relationship with him, and it's not always been a good relationship, but it was an honest relationship. That one thing he would say, Sam, you don't care what you say to me, right? The thing is, but you're honest, right? And not everybody in our community, not people outside, but in our community can handle honest, right? And we still got situations where we got organizations who are sending their clients, right, sending their staff to the conference, right, spend a little money so they can say they support it. And again, this is not a criticism. It's a pattern. It's about a pattern that we done got into, right? And the other thing is the idea of the conference is about from the inside out instead of the outside in, right? How are we, what is going on internally that we are getting in our own way? Because that's the same way I deal with my clients.
Right.
When I deal with my clients, it's like, what's going on with you internally that all the evidence outside of the world said what you are doing is stupid, right? And you keep doing this dumb shit, right? And we sit here and have a conversation with you, and it's dumb shit. So what is going on internally? And some of them will think, we'll talk about being, I'm black, and I'm keeping it real. Well, you keeping it real stupid. I'm dealing with guys who are who basically, I got probably 20 to 30% of my guys are not in my group because of the crime they committed. They are not in my group for the original crime. They are in my group how they responded to the punishment of the original crime. Think about what I'm saying. So they might have had a domestic, right? The courts put an order of protection on them, right? Which says they cannot have contact with the victim, right? And they have contact with the victim anyway. Now, I understand the difficulty in that, especially when you ain't got but one place to live.
Right.
And that's with the victim. Right? I understand it. And I'll tell them that. Or you'll say, well, she's the mother of my children, and I want to see my children. Oh, was you working that hard to see your children before? That now you violate the order of protection, and they always be violating the order of protection in a car with girlfriend, right? And girlfriend could be driving. And they get a new charge. And they might be close to getting off of probation, because on some domestic charges, depending on the level of it, you might only be on probation for a year at the most if you do everything they ask.
Right.
And we got some who and every time they violate order of protection, they increase their level of dangerousness, which increases their difficulties they're going to have in terms of jobs,
right,
housing, schooling. Ain't none of it fair. I can't waste a whole lot of time on what's fair, but I can spend time with you on your part.
Right.
On your part. What's the worst thing going to happen if you change your behavior at least for 12 months? What is your fear? And that's the same thing about the community. You know, how do we address the trauma as a result of the mistreatment of the legacy of white supremacy?
Right. Right.
Human beings hurt. If you ignore your hurt, you will end up with issues and problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And our community cannot ignore the hurt and nor the outcomes of that hurt on how it feeds on us internally as a community.
Right.
You know, because and then I love this response. What the community need to do is come together. You know, it's like saying nothing.
Exactly.
That's like saying I ain't gonna do shit.
Yeah. I mean, it goes into something. I don't even know if we want to dive too far into this, but I think that one of our responses collectively has been, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but we've accepted this victim mentality, like to the point where we feel like we can't do anything. So we'll have these phrases like we should just come together. Like we're not already together in the first place. That's part of our problem now is we don't know how to be together. We don't know how to be together in a healthy way. And I feel like we have been beaten down by the system to the point where we don't think that we can solve any of these issues. And we just have accepted we've accepted the pain. I'll just say it that way. We've accepted the trauma as something that is normal or it's expected in our lives. And I think that that is a huge problematic piece to this puzzle. So when people see this conference, it's very unique, but then for some folks, it's just like, but it's not enough, or they'll find a reason to criticize it versus seeing it as an opportunity to move us in the right direction.
Or opportunity to look at our situation differently.
Yeah.
Right. We do not get that many. Ironically, the complaints we get are very petty.
Yes.
For the most part.
They should have ordered more chicken sandwiches.
Right. Or you know, the one for last year where your platform was shaky.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't. Well, yeah, I knew it was shaky, and I told you it was shaky after we got through the first day. That's why we're not using that platform now, right?
Yeah.
And part of it, what I realized with some of the platforms is the platforms initially are complicated for the attendees to get into. Once the attendees get into them, they're not too bad, right? Because you got to download an app and then you got to do this. And people in general, and our people in particular, you know, are new to that kind of piece. We know how to use, you know, systems and know how to get online and go to our favorite place like YouTube, Instagram, and all these other kind of things, and Facebook. But you know, thing is, and I'm gonna say people in general, I'm gonna try to be nice. Don't follow directions.
Yeah.
You know, you get the link. You're supposed to go into the link a day before, get yourself already, you know, connected to the link. So when the link is ready, you can go in. You know, and that part of this whole online stuff I don't like. But the thing is the complaints have been interestingly petty.
Sure.
Right? You know, it's like, well, you probably should have had more young men invited. Well, that's fine. But I'm not a firm believer that everybody at every age need to be at everything.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard that too. Like we need to have more youth involved in the conference, but you know, some of the content isn't appropriate for a 13-year-old. So
right,
it's like they're not gonna get the full emphasis of what we're even talking about. And but again, those types of complaints or stuff like that goes back to what I'm saying about this mentality that we've developed in the community on what the solutions look like. So just having a young person at the table means that we've done something. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, just having a 13-year-old present doesn't mean that we are going to save that young man's life. but these are the soft very surface level things that we have accepted because taking real steps in action seems so far-fetched for so many people. So it's like, well, I'm just gonna bring three 12-year-olds with me to this conference, and that shows that I'm doing something.
Well, the thing is that we've had 12 and 13-year-olds there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they usually came with who? Their parents.
The parents, yes.
Yes. And usually they're parents who've had conversations with these 12, 13-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And they know why they bring them.
Right.
They will say, I want to bring them so they can see that there's a group of black men and black people who are doing things. Right? Who are doing things. I mean, my granddaughter's been at the conference 2 or 3 times, right? And that's the one of the things she's amazed by is the black people being there, what's being talked about, right? That kind of thing. So it's not about excluding anybody, right? But we're trying to have these serious conversations about what's going on, real honest about what's going on from a black people perspective, right? Not somebody telling us what's going on with us, right? And when necessary, challenging the system, right? Because the system is the system.
Mm-hmm.
I believe if we change how we address our community, can also change how we end up addressing the system, and also force the system to look at us differently.
Right.
Our trauma is not our fault, but it's our responsibility. It might not be our fault, but it's our responsibility our healing is our responsibility.
Right.
But you can't heal when you keep lying.
Right. Exactly.
You can't heal if you can't tell the truth to your own self. It's like when, it's like, oh man, Mr. Simmons, you so cold. I had people tell me you don't like black people.
Mm.
Well, why you say I don't like black people? What are you talking about? That's all I work with is black people. I've had some questions from white folks about that, but that's all I pretty much nowadays work with is black people. Right? Or maybe because I make statements that not all black children are ready to be in public. Not all black people are ready to be in public.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even believing that it's their fault.
Right.
You cannot deal with a problem from only one end. And it's not all or nothing. Right? So you say that children of color, specifically black kids, we're going to do that. I did it.
Mm-hmm.
If they are disruptive in class, and we do know there's bias about that too. Okay. Don't let me get it wrong. But because them teachers are scared of the black kids and they treat them differently than the white kids. Oh no, I've seen that. I've been in the school. But when you say that you got a kid who's extremely disruptive, you cannot, discipline them, which might mean that they might have to be away from school for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't come up with no plan on how to deal with that young person so they don't get harmed and other young people don't get harmed. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
If you ain't got a plan to deal with that child when they're not in class, or you're not putting an investment in that, right? So what happens is you will try to deal with that kid a lot longer in class, and then you get comments from kids like my granddaughter says, Grandpa, I go to school to learn. I don't go to school to watch my teacher discipline nobody.
Right.
The same kid over and over again. So she went to a different school. And so I'm all for going up against systems, but going up against systems from a standpoint of you can't do that, you are racist, without a plan on how to change the system. Is part of when you talk about that victim mentality.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we've had good attendance at the conference. It's a little slower this year, but I think it's because of online and people are trying to be outside. They ain't trying to be stuck in the house, but we didn't know we was going to be inside or outside. And the schools are not open because we have them on campuses, right? But folks, we have had, where we would be sold out if we were doing it live, right? Because the school we use have a auditorium that only holds like 310 or 20 people, and we get the sucker be packed, right? And so it's been well attended, and then ironically, it's been well attended by white individuals. Probably at the minimum, 40% of the folks who come are white. And the other part is probably 60%, probably it was 50-50 the last time we were live. It's been black women. We used to get complaints about that. Why ain't there more black men here? Because they ain't here.
Yeah. Which is it? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that a conference with men in the title, black men don't come, or they'll come and they don't come back? That's another thing too. I've seen over the years a lot of people who just popped in once and they've been out.
Yeah, our people who come every year has been pretty much black women.
The women, yeah.
Women. Well, that's because they're the keepers of our community. And they care, right? Because even in that article I wrote, if you don't address the trauma of black men, the people around them will be the ones who will be affected by that trauma, directly or indirectly, right? And that would be the women and children that are connected to that black man, right? Even and on top of that, a lot of the people who come to the conference, and see, that's the other thing about that conference model, right? Which is difficult, right? You got conference model and community event model, and we probably should do a better job on how do we, intertwine those kind of pieces. But when you're talking about a conference model, professionals are more known for that, right?
Yeah.
And so, so who are working in the helping professions at a higher level, no matter black, white, or purple, or women?
Women, yeah.
So, and I've known that there's been organizations who deal, and see, the other problem is most of the men are working, a lot of the men in the community are working with programs are called mentor programs, right? And we've had a couple organizations that, brought their mentees to the conference. And one of the things we learned early is that's fine long as you come with your mentees. Because unfortunately, we've had situations where the people weren't used to being in that type of environment. And then we've had a few who had literally fallen apart, being overwhelmed by being in that environment, right?
Sure.
And it's better to have somebody who's already working with that person there,
right?
Which has worked out fine, right? Because there's been a couple of times when we had folks who weren't used to being in an environment who were so inappropriate, we had to ask them to leave. A lot of people don't know that, but that's what I end up dealing with behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I learned, and people gonna say, "Golly, Mr. Simmons, you so negative." Everybody who tells you tell you that they're a professional ain't.
What do you mean by that, Sam?
Well,
The thin line between professional and client.
and maybe I should rephrase it. I've had speakers, panelists that I've heard at other places. I thought that gets it. I hire them, tell them what my budget is. We come to agreement for the money, put them up in a nice hotel, take care of all their expenses that include flight, transportation from the airport, transportation back, their meals. And they will treat me unprofessionally when they show up. And think I'm supposed to accept that shit. And it's like, I've seen them in action when the white folks hire them. You don't do this with the white people. Why are you doing this with me? Don't respond to emails, and something. Well, that might be it, but no, but it's been consistent. And again, and some of them folks probably do that all the time, right? And I know there's people who like that, but I've had folks who I know when they doing stuff for white folks, they don't act like this. Which has been very disappointing. And over time, not surprising. Another sign of trauma. The good thing is the conference is respected, even if it's not attended, right? But it's still a hard concept for our people. So I don't know. It gets to be frustrating over the years. I remember we had our 10-year anniversary. I got all these proclamations from, city officials and stuff, but none of them.
Both cities. Both cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul.
See, now you want to get me in trouble. So I wasn't even going to mention it.
And that's a big thing. But we go ahead and finish.
They haven't been that supportive over the years in the way I need support. Right.
Right.
And I don't know if it was a mistake because it doesn't matter to me. I even said that publicly. Right. Because I've seen how they have supported other entities in the community. And it's almost like they support those other entities in the community because they're scared not to.
Right.
That should not be a reason the only reason you should have to support an entity because you're scared.
Right.
Scared people don't get good things done or sustaining good things done. For the folks who can't do it for themselves.
Right.
So, and that's why, this year I wanted to look at the new normal. And even that has been difficult. Envisioning, if you had the opportunity to envision a new normal for Black people in dealing with systems and some of the issues with, what would you do if you had that opportunity? That is a difficult conversation for our community.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how difficult it is. Even with some Black professionals. What are you talking about new normal? What about right now? I mean, well, no, I understand about right now. I also understand the so-called normal didn't always benefit us. That
Right.
is the point.
Right.
But right now, over the last 12 months, especially the first 6 months of the pandemic, oh my God, I didn't know it was this bad. There's disparities. But we've been spending thousands and millions of dollars on addressing disparities, but you didn't know?
Right.
So what were you doing with that money that you was addressing disparities? So since it come to the light, I'm just challenging light. And I'm just saying, what do we do to challenge? Now that they say they know, I thought they knew. They say they were new. If you had the opportunity, what would you envision to do this differently for Black folks? And it's been surprising to people's response. So it's going to be interesting, these conversations that we will have during the conference when we ask these questions. I'm still trying to work out what I might say, and I cut my time down because whatever I have to say ain't gonna take no hour. I gave that time up to other people. I want to hear what other people got to say. So the other thing that I've often had to do is let people know that the conference wasn't just about me. Because I do have a following. Some of the following I know, some of the following I don't know. Are you going to speak? No, this is not about me. This is about these other folks that we're bringing in, these other voices that people don't hear that often, right? These other voices who kind of get it. And even voices, every now and then, we might have a couple of voices who don't fully get it, but got content that need to be heard and discussed. And so not everybody agree on the same thing, but we're Black folks, and we don't have to agree on everything. But we have to come up with a goal on how we're going to move forward in the future. So that we have a future that is better left for the young people coming up behind us.
Right.
So I don't know. Some days it's frustrating. And what's interesting, I got what has been bizarre to me is I got enough sponsorships for the conference. I mean, the conference will happen no matter what, right? The sponsors are always surprised, but the rules of the sponsors is you're going to give us our money. You ain't going to dictate to what we're going to talk about. Now, you might talk about how you want your logos, displayed and all the other kind of stuff. But when it comes to the content of the conference, don't give us no money if you think you're going to dictate that.
Right.
And we probably, we got sponsors who sponsor us every year. And even our sponsorships are not that much. We don't even ask for that much.
Right.
Right? I mean, I look at conferences that our high end is their low end.
Yeah. Yep.
And the other thing, well, Sam, are you using it as a way to make money? Not really. Well, you should. Those entrepreneur kind of folks, Man, this is a real money maker. Man, yeah. I know I'm not losing no money. That's for sure.
Right.
But that's not the goal. And even with the sponsorships, I give away registrations. I didn't know that was a kind of unusual to give away as many sponsorships as I give. But my thing is I want more people in I want more bodies attending. And if you're a sponsor, I want some of your bodies attending. Because if you're a sponsor, 9 times out of 10, your organization is dealing with my people.
Right.
And so your people and your organization need to attend this conference. And I found that if I offer up sponsorships, they're more likely to show up.
Right.
So, I didn't really realize that was so that much of a big deal until somebody from the States says, Sam, we enjoy sponsoring your conference. He says, you're the only ones that let us come. I said, let you come. What do you mean, let you come? You're the sponsor. Nah. Those sponsorships are kind of unique, especially the level that you give us.
Right.
I said, well, I told him the same thing I just said. I'd rather have bodies in the seats.
Right.
And I'd rather have some of your bodies in the seats because you're dealing with my people. So, what do you think?
I think that might be a good place to wrap it up for today. Folks, we were talking about the Community Empowerment Through Black Man Healing Conference, which will be going down this month, June 24th and 25th. Be sure to register. You can go to healingbrothers.com to find that, to register. It is $100 per ticket, and it will be a virtual event this year. So go ahead, register, pass the link. You can find it on healingbrothers.com. This is important for us to attend these and support these events because it is constructive information that is being shared and solutions from people across the nation and locally here in the Twin Cities who are really doing the work. And it takes a lot to put this type of conference together, but we need this to continue on to not just be the 13th annual, but we see it reach, 20 years and 25 years and so on. So those are my final thoughts. Anything else from you, Sam?
Well, I hope to see you soon.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap us up for today. We'll see you next Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Time for the Healing Brothers podcast. Peace.